Welcome to today's broadcast. This is the second episode of the ACCPA video broadcast. And ACCPA stands for Alberta Community Crime Prevention Association. And we are the connector between rural, urban, Indigenous, and Métis communities and agencies. We believe that we can build safer communities and well-being when we all work together. And this is why we foster relationships with partner organizations. Our topic today is domestic violence, and we are very excited to have Justin Dafoe and Maggie MacKillup here from Homefront in Calgary. And with me today is Jean Bota, the chair of ACCPA, and I'm Kirsten, your ACCPA host today. Officially, welcome everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Justin and Maggie, would you like to say a few words about Homefront, what you do, and then we dive into this topic of today?
Sure, absolutely. So Homefront's mission really is we want to create a safe community by eliminating domestic violence. And we do that through direct client service, justice coordination, and facilitated community action. It's really, we want people to realize their full potential and live in a society that's free of domestic violence. And Homefront is that coordinating body in the Specialized Domestic Violence Court in Calgary.
Awesome, thank you. So can we dive into like what really is domestic violence? I think it's a very broad topic, and but for people who are not really affected with that topic, we might not really know like what exactly is it. Could you explain like what exactly is domestic violence and who is affected usually?
Absolutely. So domestic violence can be interpreted differently in terms of when some people refer to domestic violence, they might refer to intimate partner violence, or it can also be used within the context of familial violence. But the definition of domestic violence itself is violence in any form against an adult or a child where they experience it by another family member. It's from someone who they generally have an intimate partner relationship, and it's about power and control. And it's generally to hurt or harm that individual and control that individual, generally done by a person who's supposed to be in a relationship of trust and dependency.
That's right. Yeah, and I would add, Maggie, too, when we see domestic violence, it also usually signals that there's other types of abuse that are happening, such as financial, emotional, spiritual. So it is very much a cycle. And that's really what we look at through that lens, not just the physical, but what other aspects are happening in the life.
Another interesting piece to that, Justin, is that the term coercive control is being used often because that is a pattern of domestic abuse where perpetrators gain control over the other person by the victim by eroding their sense of self-esteem and their autonomy. You know, it's not your physical injuries, it's your subtle threats and manipulation and coercion that really just chips away at somebody's emotional and physical well-being over time.
And I could imagine when you say like over time that something like domestic violence is not something that we are in a relationship or in a family environment, that this happens overnight. So is there like a typical journey that people go through? Like, can you give an example of what this looks like or might look like?
Sure. I don't think that anybody, when they get involved in a relationship or whether it's in the familial context of it could be father-daughter, father-son, it could be stepson, it can be ex-dating partners, it can be grandparents, really within that familial context or the intimate partner context. And it's nobody goes into a relationship thinking, oh, this person doesn't care about me, or this person doesn't trust me, or this person doesn't love me. But I think over time, it's the subtleties of the put downs, or you're no good, or you can't do anything, or, you're dependent on me, or I'm not going to give you any money. I'm going to control the money. So therefore I control you. And I think it just chips away at person's sense of well-being and independence. And it's that saying, right? If you tell a kid they're stupid long enough and often enough, they're going to believe they're stupid. And I think the same premise happens here. But often within the context of domestic violence, abusers who are trying to control whether it's their partners or a familial member, if their current state of control is not as effective, well, then you're going to see it jump to, well, if my threat didn't work or my control didn't work this time, maybe I'm going to just shove them, and that'll snap them right back into place. Or maybe I'm going to slap them, or maybe the next time, the violence exacerbates over time as the perpetrator is starting to lose control or feels like they're losing control over their ability to control that individual. And so that's why it escalates. I mean, there are just simply violent people out there, certainly, but the subtleties and the coercive control of domestic violence unfold over time. And so the damage is deeply rooted. And that's why it's not, you don't just say, hey, why don't you just leave? There's so much that has happened in the context of that relationship over time that is just, it's not a simple, an easy answer.
And what you just said, why don't you just leave? I think this is like for someone who is not involved and in this topic, it's hard to understand why someone that is being abused not just leaves, unless it is like a child. But if it's in a relationship, why don't you just go? Like if they hurt you, if they beat you up, like why don't you just leave this relationship? So I think there is a lot of emotional pressure and uncertainty, and this person, I could imagine, really lost their self-esteem. They might not have, like, do you find that those people have less connections or like a support network? Or
Absolutely. I think part of domestic violence is the isolation of the victim. I also think it's the perpetrators will increase the dependency of the victim on themselves. So again, from a financial standpoint, from an isolation perspective, they're not seeing their friends, they're not seeing their family, they're not, that it's about power and control. And that individual takes every effort and means to control that individual so that they really believe that the abuser is the only person that will continue to love them, continue to take care of them. And, it's that saying, the abusers will often go, if you didn't make me so mad, I wouldn't hit you. But it's a choice. Every person has choice to in terms of how they behave or how they act or how they are impacted by a situation. But yeah, absolutely. They don't, when you're isolating somebody, and there's a dependency on that relationship, and people often confuse it with love. And often I'm saying this is not about love. In fact, you've lost your value. You deserve respect. You deserve to be treated kindly. You are a valued person. And they lose that sense of self-esteem and self-worth over time.
So let's talk about some numbers. What what is the situation in Central Alberta, Calgary, Alberta? Like, is there how? What are we talking about? Can you share some percentages and numbers?
And I'll speak specifically from a Calgary context. The Calgary Police Service, I believe, responding to around 30,000 related domestic conflict calls for service in the past year.
Wow.
And some of them are domestic violence, and where violence occurs, charges are laid. And that's where Homefront is involved. There's other in the context of conflict where police are attending, not laying charges, and then there is community resources there to support those individuals with the hope that they don't come into justice. But within the context of domestic violence, where charges are laid and Homefront is involved right after that 911 call, we support about 5,000 families each year.
And just to add on that too, Maggie, I think really what we've seen over the past couple of years is that, traditionally looking at volume of reports, we know this is an issue that thrives in silence and that is historically underreported. And so when we really look at the numbers to get a sense of what's actually happening, we definitely need to take into consideration risk. And so when we look at our caseloads, over the past couple of years, we've seen, I would say, a slight decrease, almost 6%. So a small decrease in number of referrals and charges. That said, we also have seen a tremendous increase in the severity of violence coming forward. So when we deep dive into that, we can really see that people are waiting longer on maybe the higher risk end to receive help. And I think, compounded by the pandemic, the lockdown restrictions, that added more tools to really isolate, as Maggie was saying, victims. And so what we're seeing now is that, with the reduction of restrictions, we often see more people come forward at that time when it's safer to do so. But we also see a definite increase in the workload and severity of violence with those individuals coming forward. So we know people are waiting. So it's a balance, right? Looking at the volume of numbers is one way to get a sense of what's happening, but it also should signal that when we are seeing a decrease, that does not mean domestic violence is going away. It may signal that there are more barriers to access help.
Yeah. In just to further on that, in terms of severity, we've seen a 12, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, a 12 to 13% increase in strangulation. And also within the context of our crisis calls in 2019 and in compared to 2020, there's been a significant increase in crisis calls. And Justin, I think you have those figures, but it was maybe 15 in, am I correct? How many?
It was 29. It was
29, okay.
29 in 2019, and then that grew to over 300 in 2020. And so a crisis intervention is a suicide intervention or an intervention with a domestic in progress. And so tremendous increase in that on that side of things.
Yeah.
Are you guys, what about rural communities don't always have the facilities to accommodate a lot of victims of this? Do you see that? Do you get a lot of that coming into Calgary? Like,
So,
I know
yeah,
numbers.
that's a great question, Jean. So we, our context is Calgary in the urban center, and certainly, but we have about 4% of our clients who come from a rural setting. So they could be coming from Red Deer, they could be coming from Airdrie, they could be coming from Cochrane. And, there are just the context of the travel and the safety and the other measures that are different from an urban setting to a rural setting, right? And being able to support those individuals either, in the context of a rural setting where I think this has been sort of the blessing of COVID, if you will, and a virtual platform and the ability to connect and be safe and still provide support and resources for individuals in a broader context. And for their safety, they're not side by side with the perpetrator in some of these instances.
And I would add too, we've over the years, the Homefront model is unique. We've been studied from Japan to Ukraine in terms of how they could incorporate this into their justice system. And a key learning through that too is really that the Homefront model, it's not a copy paste. We really have to look at the context of the community, what's happening there. In rural Alberta, for example, we know that there's additional barriers for victims and service providers to create that coordinated community response. Things like, structural barriers, economic realities that those communities face. That said, I think, over the years, we've really been able to hone in on what our core pillars are that anyone can really take that and implement somewhere else.
Justin, you just mentioned the Homefront model. I would like to explore that a little bit. Can you explain what the Homefront model exactly is?
Absolutely. So really, when we look at the intervention that Homefront provides, it is unique. And so that's what we call, I guess, the Homefront model. So we are integrated partners with the justice system and police. Essentially, we are the what's next after a 911 call is made and charges are laid in a case of domestic violence. We intervene with the victim within 72 hours of that incident happening. We receive 100% of the referrals from police. After that, we have what's called the pre-court phase, where we connect with the victim. We provide them safety planning, really connections to resources. We start building that relationship with the victim at that point. Victim engagement is one of the key pillars of the Homefront model. We know that through engagement, the outcomes for all the outcomes we seek to achieve are much better. So within that 72 hours, we connect with the victim. This is in the pre-court phase. We provide safety planning, connection. We also gather their wishes, and we complete risk assessment, abuse history. In this phase, we're really trying to get a clear picture of what's happening. We know that oftentimes there's not enough information going into this just from one police report. So we're really trying to find out more of that history. What is the level of risk, right? If we're going to help this family, we need to know what they're actually facing. From there, we have the Specialized Domestic Violence Court. So this was formed in early 2000s from a lot of collaborative work that was happening in Calgary. And we sit in the Specialized Domestic Violence Court. We have what's called the early case resolution, where we case conference on every single file going before the court. And here we have partners from probation, police, Crown prosecutors, Homefront, duty counsel coming together, case conferencing, and really coming to a resolution on what's best for this case. From there, decisions are made, but we maintain that relationship with the client through the entire process. So by Homefront bringing the voice and additional information to the table, we are able to prevent victims from having to enter into the court system, having to miss a day of work, having to find childcare, which also increases the engagement throughout the process. I won't get too far into the mandated treatment portion today, but that is also an option for resolution, which is a key piece in helping offenders rehabilitate. I would say overall, the Specialized Domestic Violence Court has redefined success from looking at incarceration to more of a rehabilitation and a whole family approach, taking both the victim and the offender into consideration. Post-court, so resolutions are done and there is no typical case. Homefront maintains that relationship with the victim and ensures their safety until the probation order is complete for the offender and the victim's safety is maximized. We know not everything is black and white. We definitely work in the gray areas of this process, but our response has really produced fantastic results. So overall, 83% of first-time offenders do not reoffend 3 years post our intervention. We also know that overall, so all offenders that we've ever been a part of that case, 75% do not reoffend. Victim engagement has more than doubled since the Homefront model has been introduced, and it really is seen as the gold standard in community and justice response.
Now, and I'll just add to that, another aspect is what we call our high-risk management initiative. And what we've come to know over 20 years is that it takes a community to eliminate domestic violence.
Mhm.
Homefront can't do this work alone.
Mhm.
It is the success and the outcomes is the result of our partners at the table, all of us working together with a common vision and goal,
Mhm.
and the dedication to that deeply rooted mission and vision.
Mhm.
And so for the high risk files, our core partners are police, as Justin said, police, Crown, probation. We're the conduit for children's services, and we early case have resolutions with defense attorneys. But when we have high risk offenders and those most likely to commit domestic homicide, as I mentioned before, a lot of those relationships are so toxic and so ingrained in unhealthy behaviors and patterns of control and abuse that it takes intensive case management to work through them and small steps to get them to healthier places. And Homefront brings together 14 different agencies involved in that process to provide intensive case management, because we know the other piece that is successful about the work of Homefront and our partners is that we provide a cost savings by either not having people reoffend, supporting them through the justice system. It's a cost savings to justice, because we know anecdotally a homicide prosecution could cost as much as $1 million. And I think that's a conservative figure to, health and justice and community agencies. And so we know we're better together. And that's key to the success of building relationships.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Everything is about those relationships.
Yes.
And really, when you're talking, what an amazing idea, upstream prevention, right? You know how the community surrounds these victims and their families and the perpetrator and makes things different. Yeah, very good.
So, this sounds amazing. One of my questions would have been if you work with other organizations. You just answered that, Maggie. 14. This is amazing, and it takes, as you said, a village to help all those people. Are there different? Of course, there are different kinds of situations. So when we look at children, for example, versus maybe relationship issues, like, can you put in a percentage, like, what kind of cases you receive? Is there a trend that is maybe there? I could even see with COVID that it might have an impact.
Right. So the breakdown within the specialized domestic violence court would be intimate partner violence versus familial violence. And within that familial violence, we would have a percentage of child victims.
That's right. Overall, I would say for IPV, so the intimate partner violence, those cases sit around 75% of our total referrals each year. And that's pretty standard and average of what we see.
So what about children? When I could imagine that these numbers are maybe a little bit in the dark because they might not be able to access the help they need. They don't know how to reach out. How is it possible to help when we see, okay, there might be something going on? Like, what is a typical situation? Like, how do you help children in situations where they need to get out?
So the specialized domestic violence court deals with adult perpetrators. Now, certainly that doesn't mean that we do have child victims, but again, in that larger community context, we have what's called the Luna Center, which deals with the top percentage of child sexual and domestic violence cases. When children are victims coming through the specialized domestic violence court, we are coordinating with them. We also are the conduit to children's services voice in terms of what they want to see as conditions before the court with regards to the perpetrator. And so again, it takes that village, and Homefront will work with the non-offending parent non-offending parent in that context, while we're also communicating with the Luna Center, again, to provide that wraparound service for a child victim of domestic violence.
I would just add to that too, just in terms of the collaboration and referrals in Calgary and the services available. We live in an urban center with a lot of resources. And I think when we look at the Homefront model, we talk about victim engagement a lot. And a key of that is having Homefront be able to make those connections in the community. So when we look at who we work with, really it will be, Homefront stays in our lane. We're really good at what we do. And part of that is being able to make those connections on behalf of the client. So they don't have to retell their story. We know the more time someone has to retell their story, the less likely they are to engage. And so with the referral piece and who we work with, it's really dependent on the situation. I've seen a lot of different connections being made on behalf of clients, which have flourished into wonderful partnerships.
So like when you work with like those agencies, it looks very very specific depending on the case that you can refer the people. Do you also have like frontline workers that go out, or are you as Homefront looking, okay, who is the right partner in this case, and then they act to help the victims?
So we receive, when police lay charges after a 911 call, we receive those 24-hour reports related to domestic violence. And Homefront takes a lead in the case management on every single domestic violence file coming through the Specialized Domestic Violence Court. And then again, we are that coordinating body that connects the resources for that individual. We have a saying in Homefront, we do until. And we walk this journey side by side with our clients in their darkest moment, because we want to provide that a sense of hope that life can be better, that different decisions can be made, regardless of the context of that relationship, whether they're choosing to stay together or whether they're choosing to go separate ways. But that there is life and hope, and they as individuals are worthy of better in the context of domestic violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is, I think this is amazing that this service exists. So I before we connected with you, I didn't know, and I think it's amazing that you work with so many other agencies, and that you said it's really about having those connections and helping the people in need with exactly what they need, because like the generic help might not be as efficient as if you know exactly, okay, from those 14 agencies, this is exactly what we need. This is awesome. So thank you very much for the session today. Is there anything that you would love to share? Are there any opportunities if people want to get involved and help? Are there any programs that you would like to feature? This is your moment now.
What I always like to stress is, we never want to miss an opportunity to help somebody.
Yeah.
And we want people to be reaching out.
Yeah.
We want people to know that after a 911 call and charges are laid, that Homefront's there.
Yeah.
And it's likely the most scary, intimidating crisis of people's lives, but we will be there and we will walk through that journey with you.
Yeah.
And, nothing changes overnight, but we will stand by you and with you. Reach out for help. Resources are available.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll add to that, Maggie. I think, Homefront isn't something we want to keep secret. This is a model that can save lives. And so for anyone watching this, if you've made it this far, I would say reach out if you want to learn more. A great way to do that, as well as to visit our website at homefrontcalgary.com.
Awesome.
Great. And I'd like to just thank Maggie and Justin for coming today and giving us a bit of an overview of what Homefront does. But the important thing here is we need to start talking about this. Like it's one of those hidden, like you said, Maggie, one of those hidden secrets in communities, and we honestly have to start talking about it. So I thank you very much for your time today. It was very much appreciated. Thank you, Kirsten.
Awesome.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. And we will share your information later on as well. And for everyone watching today, thanks so much. Give us a like, follow us on YouTube later on when we upload the video. And we will see each other again with our next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.